Alrighty.
Aloha, I'm Desmond Hakias with Healing with Aloha podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. The podcast is about dealing with grief and loss and also mental health. And I'm so honored and privileged to have Monique Farook here. She has her own podcast, guys. It's called Infertility and Me podcast. So I found her on Instagram and I felt that she is in a niche that is very important that we all need to be aware of and connect to because we're not alone in this. And so before I go on, Monique, if you'd like to share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Monique, as Deslin stated. Thank you so much, Deslin, for having me on and connecting with me on Instagram. I'm so glad that we got a chance and the opportunity to speak today and connect with each other, especially during these times when we're all social distancing and feeling a little anxious, and there's some social injustices going on here in the States. So it's kind of like very tense already from COVID, and now with a couple of people in the Black community having been murdered the way that they have.
Yes.
It's just taking things to a whole new level, and then we have elections coming up like right around the corner. So it's just a lot going on right now, and retail stores and different places are trying to open up to give some sense of normalcy, but nothing replaces the feeling of PTSD, depression that people are feeling being at home and not being able to connect with loved ones the way that they normally would, and everything just feeling so robotic. So I'm just so happy that we got to connect, and also, just connect with each other so that others can watch the video or hear it on podcasting and feel like they're less alone, and that, we really are in this thing together. So I appreciate you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's serious. The social injustice that's been going on for years, and only now we're having video and whatnot to identify this is what's been going on. It's not new, it's been. And so being
Yeah.
able to address it and find ways to bring about social change, as we as mothers are raising our children, we
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to know we did the best that we could,
Yeah.
and so that they can have a safer be in society and be accepted and be safe. Like
Yep.
ultimately, that's what it's all about. People are fighting for the freedom to be in a safe place, and so it as podcasters, we have a platform like we spoke about earlier, providing an opportunity for people to tell their story, whatever it is that is laid on their hearts, so that we can empower other people to tell their story, whether it's in person or on a platform like social media.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal. And so, what inspired you to start Infertility and Me podcast?
Well, it was after my son was born, and we conceived him through IVF in August of 2016. And 6 months later, January 2017, ironically, inaugural Friday, when President Trump was put into office, I gave birth at 5:34 p.m. to a 24-week, 4-day gestation age baby. And so we spent 129 days, aka 4 months, in the NICU, and
Wow.
he graduated from the NICU May 29th, 2017, and it was 2 weeks past his original due date. When he came home, he wasn't on any oscillating machines. Well, he wouldn't have came on an oscillator anyway, because that's like really extreme. But he didn't come home on any oxygen. So that was like a relief, because it is a lot to take care of a baby who's on oxygen at home, whether it's through the trachea or whether it's through the mouth. And so he came home fully extubated, is what it's called. And he was living life as a normal infant, and he was showing signs of not having any mental or physical delays when he came home. He was rolling over the next day when he came home, and he was sitting up on his tummy. So I knew that he physically was okay. We just didn't know if intellectually he was going to be okay. And
Yeah.
he did have some cysts in his throat, which caused a reflux issue. And so he could only sleep on his back, semi-elevated. And then he had surgery later that summer of 2017 to have those cysts removed. It was taking up a lot of his airway in his throat. And it's
Wow.
very common for premature babies who are born as early as him to develop cysts because they were intubated for the first month or 2 months of their life. And so he was about maybe, let's see, 2 years old when I started getting this feeling like, well, maybe it's time for me to tell my story. And it just became this burning desire to do something more than just be somebody's mom or somebody's wife. And I wrote a book, which I haven't released or edited yet, but I wrote a book, and that's how I healed. It was part of my healing when I wrote the book on paper, on my laptop, about my journey through infertility and being a NICU mom. And we suffered through infertility for 4 years before I conceived him. And we had a couple of unsuccessful cycles. And it was very isolating for me, especially being a Black woman, because it's very taboo in the community, in the Black community here in the US. And in the US specifically, 1 in 8 of every couples goes through infertility. That's the statistic right now. Is 1 in 8 couples suffer through infertility, whether it's male or female. In my case, it was female factor. I had hypothyroidism, which is a hormonal disease. The thyroid is in the throat and it controls every hormone in your body. And
Wow.
so mine wasn't producing enough, which is why it's called hypo and not hyper. And so it was prohibiting me from becoming pregnant. And I had never been pregnant before, and I had been on birth control in my early 20s for a long period of time. And after I got off of that, I met my husband, and then we never got on birth control of any sort. And we were married for 2 years before we started trying, and it just wasn't happening. It just never happened. So I knew something was wrong with me or either him, but it was me. And I had what's called uterine polyps, which are small growths in the uterus, and sometimes it'll trick the body into believing during a time frame when a woman in her cycle can become pregnant. So the egg won't implant. Even if it was fertilized by the sperm, it won't implant if there's a growth in there because it'll think that maybe there's another baby there already. And so
Oh, wow.
the body is very intelligent like that. So, and then if a woman does become impregnated while she has uterine polyps, they usually wait until the baby's born to remove them. So they'll do it like right after birth or something like that. They'll go in there, and it's a very simple procedure. It's not highly invasive or anything. So I had those removed and had the hypothyroidism treated for 3 months before we could move forward with our IVF. And so that's when we conceived on the second try through IVF in August of 2016. I became pregnant with him. So it was a lot, going through infertility and then having a really early baby. It was a mess. It was a mess, and feeling like you were going through it alone to a certain degree. Like, I'm very close to my mom, my dad, my sister, and I have very few friends, very, very, very few friends. So, but when I was going through infertility, I didn't tell anybody. Only my mom, my dad knew. And so it was just a very silent thing. And it was like an elephant we were walking around with as a couple and not knowing how to talk to each other about it too. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And so that's what inspired me to do the podcast, because I just felt like it was time to come out of the closet about it and connect with people and give somebody else the opportunity to share their journey and to connect with someone and have an impact on somebody else's life. And so a lot of the episodes are women like myself or men who have been through it. And they may be coaches now, or they may be therapists within the infertility community helping others. And I've had some doctors on there, and I've had some acupuncturists. A lot of people are doing acupuncture to help with their IVF cycles because it releases a lot of stress. And so it's a multifaceted show, but at the end of the day, it's all about healing and doing things that promote healing, whether you choose to go through infertility or whether you choose to stop. Infertility treatments, IVF treatments, or medicated cycles. So it's just centered around healing, and that's my thing. I just want people to feel like they can get healing, from listening to other people's stories, getting the proper information from trusted doctors. I promote products on there that are usually organic, FDA approved, and or natural, have a lot of natural ingredients on it. I don't promote products on there that I wouldn't use myself, even though I'm not trying to have another baby right now.
Yeah.
But I provide that information for everyone else, because at the end of the day, the podcast is not about me. It's about those out there who are suffering and just need someone to advocate for them and give voice to the pain. So that's how I got.
No, we were able to speak prior to this, and it's amazing how you felt so isolated that when you came forward to share from your heart what you were going through, not expecting anything, and then like you find people that you connect with like a magnet from all over the world, because you know you connected with people in Canada, you connected people overseas because you're located in Maryland. But it's amazing how when you open your heart and you share your story, that it does empower someone else to do the same.
Yeah.
I think as podcasters, we have to shed light on all angles, whether it's a professional or just someone like us who've gone through life and have experienced things that we've, and that isolation and that suffering is no longer me, it's we.
Yeah. It becomes less selfish at that point. And when I was going through IVF, there was a community on Instagram, and there was a very strong community on Instagram. It wasn't as big 4 years ago as it is now. Now it is like so many people you can connect with on Instagram within the fertility community and infertility community if you just put in a certain type of hashtag and you do the search. And there's so many women, so many men speaking and advocating and sharing their lives and sharing what they're going through on a daily basis about what it's like. And so it's a beautiful thing, and it connects people from all different types of cultural backgrounds and social backgrounds. And when I was going through it, I attempted to be on Instagram, and I had a very private page. Like, my face wasn't on the main profile pic because I didn't want anybody from Facebook to, like, you know how Facebook will suggest people to you on Instagram. Yep. Yes, I was like, ain't no way in the world I'm connecting myself to this thing. So, you know, it was just very hush hush and quiet. And it took me up. It wasn't until I started the podcast that people on my timeline knew how I conceived him. Up until then, everybody just thought it was the natural way. And anyone who did know, it was because it was somebody that I spoke to and were friends with off of Facebook. Because I don't usually friend people who I don't know in person. And so, or have known in high school or college or something like that. And so, you know, if it was somebody who knew that about the infertility, it was because I was friends with them off of there, and I wasn't just like keeping in touch, you know. So it was, I didn't have my profile picture. I had pictures of myself on the private page, but it wasn't the main profile pic, so nobody would know who it was. And it was named something completely ambiguous that nobody would, you know, connect back to me in case it was suggested to them, you know. So it was like that. And then when I was on Instagram at the time, there weren't as many people of color speaking about it at the time. Wow. It was a more predominantly Caucasian. Yeah, it was very, very, very Caucasian at the time. Now it's still predominantly Caucasian women who are speaking about it, but there is a strong people of color community as well. And it really doesn't make a difference at the end of the day unless you're just racist. So, but yeah, that's through podcasts, I see how strong the impact now of Instagram is with infertility now. So it's great.
You've been really great about it all this time, and been fortunate to meet people all over the world through. Do you feel like there's a lot of shame in seeing, you know, we're having difficulty in with our fertility? Like, do you feel that's a common denominator? Because you're basically
there's a lot of shame,
breaking that part of it, like you're shedding light. Yeah. So
there's a lot of shame in it. And there's a lot more shame in it for women of color because we are perceived as being hyper fertile a lot of times in society, especially here in the U.S. I'm not sure what it's like in the U.K. or, you know, in other various continents and stuff. But here in the U.S., women of color are looked at as being hyper fertile. And it comes from a lot of really disgusting things that were happening 200-300 years ago, and why that is believed. We're just believed as being super fertile people, and it's just not it. You know, we struggle just as much as anyone else, but the problem is that statistically, people of color do not seek treatment and or help with their fertility issues the way the Caucasian women do. And then you have to realize that because of social injustices and institutionalized racism, women of color and men of color do not speak out the same way, and they don't feel comfortable speaking out as freely, because then we're perceived as being too passionate and too aggressive. And it's a lot of that, as well as why it's predominantly a Caucasian, you see a lot of Caucasian women all over the place talking about fertility and infertility,
Mm-hmm.
because we just don't feel safe. Just like right now, a lot of people in the US don't feel safe. People of color don't feel safe right now from cops. I get anxiety when a cop is behind me, so it's that kind of a thing in the community of infertility too. We just don't feel safe enough to speak and to be accepted. And that was a lot of the reason for feeling silently suffering, which I really did. I was isolated and I was silently suffering. And that's why I created the podcast, because I figure if someone like you, Deslin, or somebody that has my complexion sees my face on the podcast artwork, they'd be like, oh, wow,
You're like
well,
me.
maybe let me listen to this, or maybe let me connect with her. Maybe I'll go on and tell my story. And so I'm getting a lot of women of color coming on and speaking about it more. And the longer I stay in it, the longer I do the work, the more people of color are coming to me and wanting to speak about their journeys and or about the expertise part of fertility and infertility that their work is in. So it's a beautiful thing. And I have Caucasian women, I've had North Asian women, South Asian women. So it's really just about inclusivity and representation and making sure that everybody has a place. And I've had a couple of men on as well. So it's been great.
I think it's important. I think it's important for people to know that maybe in the past there's certain taboo or topics we don't talk about. Like even for grief and loss, because
Mm-hmm.
that's something I touch upon in mental health. They all go hand in hand. Like if
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
try to get pregnant and then you have a miscarriage, people are grieving. And sometimes they'll say,
Mm-hmm.
depending how far in the pregnancy is, some people will know you're pregnant,
Yeah.
and having
Absolutely.
to grieve that
Yeah.
is hard, you know,
Yeah.
and feeling like, your dreams and your hopes were invested, and then this happens, and then so I think it's important, your platform, because it goes beyond what your intentions were. It,
Mm-hmm.
it encompasses so much more, that allows people to express their grief, their sadness,
Yeah.
and admit that their mental health went out the door in trying to understand this, and not identifying themselves based upon if they have a child or not. And then, like it just, you start doubting yourself and your self-worth.
Oh yeah.
And I think,
Oh yeah. You feel less than a woman, and you feel less than a man. And even for somebody like my husband who didn't have the fertility issue, he still had moments where he's like, well, daggone it, I can't even get my wife pregnant. And this was before getting the initial diagnosis, not knowing who it was, on what end it was coming from. But all he knew as a man is that his wife wasn't getting pregnant, and he had the seed to give her. You know what I mean? So it's a lot. And then dealing with the grief, like you were just speaking about, when you go through infertility and have fertility struggles, or women who may not have problems getting pregnant, but she has recurrent miscarriages. And I've had people like that on too as well. And it's just, like you said, it really makes you doubt yourself as a person. And one thing that infertility taught me was, I've always been a self-growth, self-motivated person, but it really just I learned how to look beyond the surface level. Like in psychology, they teach you about surface level issue and how it presents itself through your actions. But then when you go beyond the surface level of the sea, emotions that you have, there's all these other things that make up what comes out, and infertility teaches you to go beyond the surface level and go deeper, and to find out what the root cause is. And that's really what my show is all about. And I just hope that when the people come on, I always tell them, whatever you want to talk about is fine. And whatever you want to say is fine. It's on you. And whatever you want me to take out, I'll do that, because you have to feel comfortable about your situation being put out there to thousands of people potentially, and whatever's going to come from that for you as a person, and not just for what comes to me as a podcaster, because the people that listen, they will go and find these people that come on Instagram, and they'll connect with them there too. So we just have to be mindful as people who are in the healing business of podcasting, that I always, like I said earlier, I always go into the mindset of a new discussion with it's not my journey that they're listening for. It's the other person, what they have to offer when they come on, and their perspective and their wisdom and their insight. And grief, it comes in many forms. I grieved the fact that I couldn't get pregnant naturally. I grieved the fact that I could never give my husband a surprise pregnancy test. It's very small details that come along with infertility that you get robbed of. I didn't get a chance to surprise family members, because at that point, when I was getting ready to go through infertility treatment again, IVF treatment, I was starting to tell like my aunt or my grandmother, and so there was no surprise factor. You lose that with infertility, and everything is so planned, and everything is on a schedule, and sex is timed if you're on a medicated cycle and such. So it robs you of a lot of things. And so I grieved the fact that I couldn't have those moments, is what I call them, that you would normally have if you could get pregnant naturally. And then when my son was born early, I never had a baby shower. I never got to take the maternity shoots, the photos and such. And my husband never got to feel my son kick through my womb. He missed that. Like, I was getting the kicks, but babies do their own thing in utero, just like they do when they come out. My husband put his hand, my son will be kicking, but then my husband will put his hand on it, and the baby goes,
like not
go
kicking.
quiet. Yeah, he'll just go quiet. So he never, as a father, he never experienced that. And he never experienced the moments when I'm 8 or 9 months pregnant, and you can see the baby's foot going across the top of my belly button, from the outside. So it's just so much that we're robbed of because of fertility. But then we gained, 10 times more back after the birth of our son, and he was home and he was healthy. But it was a lot of grief that I was feeling after he was born. I grieved the fact that I never had a full-term pregnancy, and I never will again, more than likely, and because I'm coming close to 40 years old. And so there's risks that come along with being an older mother trying to get pregnant. So it's a lot. It's a lot to work through. It's a lot to work through. But I made sure that when I started the podcast that I had worked through those things, and so that I could then be of service to someone else. And that's what I'm all about on the podcast, is being of service.
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing I think we both can agree on is the journey through grief. It's personal. And
Mm-hmm.
what one person would grieve about, maybe someone else wouldn't, but it doesn't
negate the fact that
and the work, because we are all evolving, and
mm-hmm.
each day is a moment, but when you add it up, becomes your life, and those moments become memories.
Yeah.
Maybe someone didn't experience a miscarriage or whatnot, but you did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's important to you, and people acknowledging this is the birth of my child, that it's important. If that is something that's important to you, then you do what you have to do for your own healing, celebrating life. When people die in Hawaii, we don't, not all of us call it a funeral, we call it the celebration of life.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I wish we Americans would take on more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we celebrate that they lived and that we had them for all those years. We release balloons, we go to the ocean, people paddle out on surfboards and boogie boards, canoes, flowers come down on the helicopters. We have a party, and we just celebrate their life.
Yeah.
And it's cultural, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
it's me too. And I have friends who celebrate their child's lives,
Yeah. It's healing.
It's healing.
It's very healing. And that's why I said I wish that Americans would take more onto that. There are select communities in here in America, like in New Orleans, for instance. they do celebrations. You'll see it on TV where they have the parade lines and they play
Wow.
music and they dance on the way to the gravesite. And so that is a way for them to honor their ancestors. And it's mostly the Creole and Black community in New Orleans who do that, because they've held on to a lot of the traditions from Africa and the Caribbean islands where, you know, the people come from. So, you know, there's things like that that happen here, but for certain classes or certain groups of the Black community and other cultures, we don't have those kinds of traditions because essentially we don't even know who the heck we are, where we came from in Africa, you know, from our ancestors and stuff. And so we have to create cultural identities and we have to create these different things. And so there's a lot going on, but people are now starting to celebrate more their loved ones. And I know we definitely did for my grandmother a couple years ago, because she died just a few shorts. Let's see, but the baby came home in May 29th, 2017, and she was gone by Thanksgiving of 2017. So she had just enough time to meet him physically in person because she lived in New Jersey. And she got to see him that August of 2017, and she got to meet him, and we had pictures of them together and stuff. So that was a blessing. And she lived long enough to be there for me. I get emotional because she was my last living grandparent, and we were very close. We spoke a lot, and she always called me to check on me and the baby when he was in the NICU. And you know, it was like a daily thing for me to send her pictures and, you know, all those different things. So she was there for me a lot, even though she couldn't be here physically. She was here for me, you know, on the phone and calling me and making sure we're okay. And she sent him some stuff, you know, so I still have like the baby stuff that she sent him, like the last thing she sent him and stuff. So it's, you know, grief comes in many forms, and you don't get over what happened. You just kind of learn to live with what happened. And so that's what infertility has been like. Like, you heal from the scars, but then you just learn to deal with the fact, like, I can't have a second baby, you know, without the help of a specialist, or if by some miraculous touch from the creator or the angels, you know, I get pregnant on my own, you know. And so I agree that I'm kind of agreeing that right now at this point in my life. Like, I can't give my son a sibling in the way that I would prefer, without having to spend $20,000 out of my savings to do so. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, it's just a lot. The last 3.5 years of my life have been crazy. I've lost so many people in the physical world. After the birth of my son, it is like, I just can't even begin to tell you how much grief myself as an individual and as a family, we have lost so many people on both sides, my mom and my dad's side. And I had a very close friend, two close friends lose babies who were the same age as my son. So they were 2, 1.5, 2 at the time when they passed away. And they were all like my son. One of them was born in September, then the other one was born in November, and then my son was born in January. So they were like, the 2 babies that we lost were the same age as my son. And it's been a lot of grief these last couple of years. And so when COVID took place, I was like, you know what, right daggone now, I'm claiming it that we are not going to lose anybody else. You know, both sides of my family, and with my 2 close friends who have had losses too in the last couple of years. We're not losing anybody else. I'm not accepting anything other than that. And that's what I put out into the universe. And so we've made it this far.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just crazy trying to create content in a time such as this. And I know you understand it. And you friend out there listening or watching, you may understand it too if you're a content creator, like trying to create content during this time and keep yourself full and still being able to give out to the world even when you're full, because sometimes you'll get spiritually full and then you don't want to share it. You know what I mean? I have moments where I still don't want to share it even though I have it. And I have to remember that it's not about me at the end of the day, and that it's for me to give out. If I hold it on too much, then how can I get new if I don't let go of the old? So it's crazy out here, but we're making it, right?
Yeah. I think, gosh, I'm all emotional. My grandmother just died last year, September. I tell people, when you love somebody deeply and they reciprocate that love, that it's normal to feel pain. It's okay to cry.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we grew up being told, be strong, be strong.
Yeah.
Crying
yeah. It's something you have to learn. Yeah, sometimes.
Crying is it's your soul is just you're letting go of the sadness, the anger, the regrets, whatnot. Like you let
The
it go.
fear, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah,
The
all of that.
I don't know about your grandma, but I was struggling a lot with being a people pleaser last year, and my grandfather died of cancer in 2013, and so she was my last grandparent, and I was trying to figure out what to do because I I knew she was already at the end, and
Mm,
I ended up resigning from my job working
wow.
for the county because the day before Papa died, I said, "It's okay, you can go now."
Mm-hmm,
And he
mm-hmm.
couldn't even open his eyes and he shook his head no. And I was like, for my papa to be at end of life and tell me no, that means he doesn't trust
Yeah.
us. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh.
Right. That's crazy.
And so because he was one of those men, like he just loved my grandma. So the day he couldn't,
Right.
he would serve
Yeah.
my grandma her food and her drinks. Like he was just that type of man, you know? And so
Mm, 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 mm.
she said, this is what she said, do what makes you happy. Because at the end of your life, you can't blame no one.
But
And
yourself, yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
was like powerful. And I cried. I'm like, yeah, but it's hard. Like you want everybody to be happy around you, but for what? If you're not,
Right.
what good is it? Because the people
Mm-hmm.
that you're trying to make
Mm-hmm.
happy, no matter what you do, they still not gonna be happy because it's not even about you. You know,
Yeah.
it's so much deeper. Um,
Very.
and so it's like that when you grieve. It doesn't matter if people want you to be open about your grief. Some people have Instagrams to share their grief, to share
Right.
mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other people in the family are
Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah.
they don't want people to know. It's like, you know what? You live your life. This is your journey. And then hope you touch someone else's life. That's my decision. If you want to sit and not talk about it, I'm not judging you. That's on you. But don't tell me, don't post this. Why did you do this? Why? Because your fear of people's judgment of you. It doesn't matter if people
Mm-hmm.
judge you. They're gonna judge. People are gonna have an opinion, but they're not gonna. At the end of the day, they're not gonna be.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
I think it's good for us to have podcasts. It's more than the numbers. It's about touching someone that is hurting, and they
Mm-hmm.
need to
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh my gosh, you can relate to me. People need to
Yeah.
know that they're not the only one, and that they're loved, that they're special,
Yeah.
and they're destined for greatness. Even in their pain, some of the people who are the most passionate come from very painful backgrounds.
Yeah. Very, very painful because when it comes from a place of passion and good intention and with love, I feel like that's the secret key to success in whatever it is that you do. It's got to be what your intentions are and what you're doing it for. And if it's based on greed or if it's based on narcissistic ideas of what you want to do with your life, my mom used to tell me all the time growing up, she's like, no matter what you do in life, the only thing that will matter the most when you pass away is how you were of service to others. And she said, if you choose a career that is selfless, you'll never go without.
Wow.
Or if you choose a passionate hobby that is selfless and it's not centered around you and who you are and what you think people want to know or what you think people want to hear, then you'll go far and it'll take you places that you never thought that you'd be able to go on your own will. And I truly believe that, and my podcast started out as a hobby, but it's become so much more than that. It's become way more than just a creative outlet for me. And I'm pretty sure you feel the same way as well.
Yeah, it's about connecting the dots through people and allowing them to know that as you navigate life, there's other people alongside you to learn this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
somebody in your family or your friends you've known your whole life can't understand, but there's someone out there for you
And I
to
feel like, yeah. And I feel like when people do start going back into normal activities and things begin to open up fully again, and they're at work and they're in the office setting again, I feel like these types of podcasts will be even then more important to remind everyone, look, hey, don't lose yourself. Don't lose all the progress you made, and where you're going. And what your goals are personally and career wise. And, it's, it's just a lot right now.
Yeah.
I keep saying it.
Yeah.
It's a lot right now.
I tell people sometimes success, when your mental health, you're going through it, because I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in 2006. Success, when you're in your darkest times, contemplating things that is hard, getting out of bed,
It's a
so people
task.
have to be kind to themselves, even now with the pandemic, even now people standing up for the social injustice that's been going on for years. We have to be able to know when we need to step back and reflect and take care of our mental health, because sometimes you going with work, going passionate to do something, but what is it if your health is on the brink, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and you have kids, you have parents, so, being able to find harmony, not balance, because you and I know as moms, you'll never have balance. Your house will be clean, your kid will be like, your kid will be, good.
Knocking everything over. Telling you, yes.
So just finding harmony with yourself and your family, and the best that you can do to show kindness in the world, whether it's through social media or in real life. That's ultimately what we can do and to offer it. And our best is good enough. Like, you may think, I'm not doing enough. Hey, your 80% is someone's 100%. Your 20% is someone's 80%. I don't know, but you just showing up with that one inspirational quote, or you saying I'm having a bad day, it makes an impact, because then you show the human side of you. We're human. We're not perfect. We don't have it all together. And I think you letting people know that we're in this together, whether you're here in America, the US, or if you're overseas, just know that someone cares, and that's powerful.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's very similar to my tagline. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's very similar to my tagline. My tagline for the podcast is connecting and healing together. Yeah. So, it's we just gotta stay connected. Gotta stay plugged in. Gotta stay plugged in, and then plug out when it becomes too much. That goes for watching the news, watching media, being on Facebook news and all that other stuff, and plugging out and going outside and getting back to the basics of just being human and being a spirit, having a human experience, so, and just,
Well, I'm so grateful that I met you. Prior to us even go live, like, we were able to talk, and you're a mom, and I know it's lunchtime in Maryland, and so I'm like, okay, I know Dad's there, but still, mom has a special But can you tell everybody how they can, what is the best way for them to find you on social media?
I can be reached at Infertility and Me Podcast on Instagram, and my email address is also the same, infertilityandme@outlook.com.
Okay.
Very simple. I like to keep it simple.
And I plan to be in your life beyond this.
I'm looking forward to it, girl.
I know. Yes, I love this girl. You have a good day, and you be safe, and I'll keep in touch with you, okay?
Awesome. Thank you, Desley.
Thank you so much for joining us. Aloha.